In a previous video about CD video, you might have noticed this CD player being used briefly for a couple of seconds. If you didn't, I'm not surprised, but quite a few people did notice it and wanted to know more information about it. So that's exactly what this video is going to be. Now, don't switch off just yet. I know it's just a CD player, but it does have quite a few interesting features that I want to show you. Now, it just so happens, as I was starting to put this video together, I was contacted on Twitter by this group Candy Apple Blue, who wanted to send me a free promotional copy of their new album, Powers Activate, on a CD. And they said this wouldn't hit any YouTube content matches. In addition, it's got vocals on here, which is something I need to be able to demonstrate a particular feature of this player. And it's also got CD text as well, which is something you don't see very often. So I've taken them up on their offer, which means they get some free promotion and I get a disc with which I can demonstrate the various features and functions of this device. Now, the machine in question is the Superscope PSD300. It's also sold under the Marantz brand, but the Superscope ones seem to be more common. But you'd be forgiven for never noticing one of these before because they weren't generally marketed to your average consumer. They were sold through music shops and to professional musicians and music teachers and people like that, because it's got some features that are designed for that particular group. But before I go into detail on those, let's just have a general look around the device, because it's a very complicated looking machine, very purposeful as well, but I think a beautiful design, and I'll break down the features one at a time. We'll start around the back on the inputs and outputs. On the far left we've got RCA output for mix. I'll explain what that is later on, and then a line out and auxiliary in that are standard analog, as well as digital inputs and outputs over coax, RC5 remote control input and output, and a foot pedal socket there so you can start and stop the playback remotely. We've got a proper power button at the bottom right, as well as the input for the cable. It's got a built-in transformer in here. There's no external power bricks. That just goes straight into there. There's no battery power on this thing. It does look like it might run on batteries, but it doesn't. You have to plug it in. I'm plugging it into a set of external speakers here. It does have its own built-in speaker, but it's a little bit weedy, so I'm going to demonstrate it through that speaker as well as through the external ones. Now, it does have its own built-in microphone at the back there, but for best results, if you're recording over microphones, you're going to be using these XLR inputs on the front for the left and right stereo, or the jack plug sockets next to them. And on the top here at the front, you'll see we've got the display there, which gives us a lot of information about the various features and menus and things. You'll be seeing quite a bit of that later on. Now, the top middle, this is a CD player, a top loader. The controls for play, pause, stop, fast forward and rewind are next to that. The track skip are operated off the center dial in the middle of the machine. Now, at the bottom right here, these are the controls for the CD recorder. You'll see we've got some additional controls for record, erase and finalize there. Now, the CD recorder is a traditional front loader device. Down at the bottom here, it's a 2x speed CD recorder. Now, this machine is covered in switches, controls and dials, and it does make it look pretty complicated, but it actually simplifies things down, in my opinion, because nowadays if you got something like this, it was recording onto a hard drive, it had a large touch screen on it, these things would be buried down in sub-menus of menus of menus, whereas on here everything's got its own position. You can see just by looking at it what you've set things to. Is it on? Is it off? Which way is the dial pointing? I just prefer this way of doing things, but I understand, of course, why things aren't like this nowadays. The more buttons something has, the more likely things are going to go wrong, whereas this, I've got to say, is working perfectly. But anyway, let's just have a look what happens when I put this CD in here, because it's got CD text on it, which is something you don't see very much, and I was glad to see it on this disc because it enables me to demonstrate the CD text function. Now, before this disc arrived in the post, I was looking for other CDs in my collection which I could use for demonstrating the CD text, and the only ones I found it on were some hybrid SACDs, and it wasn't even on all of those. Now, if you look at the display, you can see this title it's going across. It's quite a long one, and it will display all the text that's in that title if you use the disc in the top drive in the CD player. If you put the same disc in the CD recorder at the bottom, it only displays the first 24 characters of it. Now, as well as the CD title, track title and artist as included on this disc, using the CD text standard, it is possible to include a lot more text information on a disc. It's just a shame that over the years this is a feature that's largely been ignored. Now, the built-in speaker on this machine is really just there for monitoring recordings. It isn't something that you'd enjoy listening to your music through. Although it does have controls for bass, mid and treble, which not only affect the output through the speaker, but also over the line outs as well. Now, if you want, you can listen to the internal speaker at the same time as using the line outs, or you can mute it by turning the volume all the way down or just flipping this switch on the right hand side. However, I've hooked it up to these external powered speakers for this next demonstration, where I want to show you some of the features this machine has that have been designed for people either teaching or learning music. It's all regarding these 4 buttons that are below the screen. I was particularly impressed with that VR function there, but just wrapping a couple of these other features up, we've got single. That will play just a single track on a CD. So you select the track, and when you're in single mode, it plays it all the way through, gets to the end of it and stops. Doesn't automatically go on and play the next track. And then of course you could, if you wanted to play the next track, just by pressing play again. And then the final feature that I want to show you on here as far as playback features go is changer mode. If we switch this on, it will operate like a CD changer. So if you've got a disc in drive A and drive B, when it finishes playing the first disc, it will then start playing the second. And of course, whilst it was playing that disc, you could open the top lid up, swap that disc out to something else, so that then when it returned to it, you were keeping the party going with a non-stop music megamix. And I've got to mention these backlit colour buttons. I love a backlit button because not only do they tell you exactly what's going on at the moment and what functions activated, I just think they look gorgeous as well. Now, you might be aware that I always appreciate a VU meter on a piece of music equipment. Of course, generally you don't get them on compact disc players, but this is a compact disc recorder and it's really there to monitor the recording levels. So plugging in a stereo microphone, you can see I can bring the recording levels over so it's peaking out, and of course to reduce those down you can twist these dials here to reduce your recording levels, or you can use the auto level control switch instead. Now, earlier on I mentioned that mix output on the left there. If I was to take the sound out of that, I get a mixture of the compact disc being played together with the inputs that I've plugged into the machine. So in this case it's me singing, I'm using inverted commas there, over a microphone, and I can turn the voice off on the original recording to make my own rather unique version. Now, up to this point, I've only used the playback functions. We've got this whole CDR mechanism to play about with yet. So this will use either CDR or CDRW discs, and I just want to do something simple to start with. Once we've pressed the record button, we can then use various different record modes. I'll show you some of those, but this first one, I'm just going to do a simple thing and record off the built-in microphone that's on the back of the machine, just to see how well that records my voice. Right, so I've just done a quick test. I was very impressed with it. The sound quality is remarkably clear. To say it's only coming through this little microphone at the back. Let's just have a listen back to this. Right, so I'll turn the speaker on and we'll press play. We'll select track 2. Right, so I've just done a quick test. I was very impressed with it. The sound quality is remarkably clear. To say it's only coming through this little microphone at the back. Right, so now we're going to move on and copy a compact disc. You can see we've got an original one in the top there. I've got a blank in the bottom. We can copy it at 2 times speed and finalise it afterwards if we want to. We can create a half speed version which plays back at half the speed. Synchronise record automatically starts recording when it hears sound through the inputs, and we'll just go back to the standard copy 2 times and finalise. That just makes a 1-to-1 disc copy. Now when we select that, it goes into record pause mode, and all that we have to do here now is just press the record button and it will automatically copy the disc across and finalise it for us. And as you can see on the timer here, it's running at 2 times speed. This is the maximum copy speed. It says in the manual here that this might be useful for a teacher handing out copies of what a class had done to all the different people there. I'd hope they didn't have too long a class because it would take them quite a long time to copy all those discs. Now you might notice when I press play on this that it's also copied across that CD text information. Now there is a limitation on this. It does truncate it down a bit. It only copies the first 24 characters of each field. So you might remember track 5 that we played earlier on had a really long title. It was featuring someone and remixed by someone else. Well, in this case we just get the beginning of the title, but I still think that's much better than nothing. Now the CD text information only appears once you've chosen to finalise a disc, so if we copy the disc again, but this time choose not to finalise it, we'll just leave it in the open state, that would then enable us to change that text. Now of course most CDs that you copy wouldn't have any text on, so this would be your opportunity to add titles into those tracks if you wanted to. On this one I'll be editing the existing text, so if we just go in and look at the first one, which is the title of the album, Powers Activate, if I just do a quick change to that, because I'm using this dial in the middle, as you can see it's going to take some time, so I'll just change that one to Towers Activate just to show you this feature works. And we're going to track 4, which is called Mad About You, and I'll just do a quick change to that one as well, so let's make that Dad About You. So to apply the changes we've made, we just click finalise. This then writes on the remaining section of the disc, the blank section at the end. There's only a couple of minutes left here, so it doesn't take very long at all. And once that's done, the CD text has been applied to the disc, and we can now see the title of the album has been changed, as well as the title of track 4. Now, because this is classed as a piece of professional recording equipment, it doesn't have to comply with the SCMS. That's something that's employed on consumer devices like mini discs, DAT, DCC and CD recorders, which would prevent you from making a digital copy of an original album. This thing just doesn't care. You can copy whatever the heck you want. One handy feature if you are recording off an external player is sync record. This holds the recorder in record pause until such a time as the signal starts coming through from your external device. It doesn't miss the start of the track off, because in this case it's just looking for the digital signal coming through over coax. And if you want, you can monitor the recording over the device's built-in speaker. Now if you are recording a digital source, it might be worth switching auto track on. This reads the track indicator that's sent through with the digital signal and inserts it at the appropriate place on the recording. Therefore, rather than having one long recording, you get the individual track numbers coming through as well. Now, you can still use this feature when you're doing something like recording an analog source, in this case a record. What it does in this case is it looks for a period of silence in the recording, a couple of seconds or so in between tracks. And when it hears that, it will incrementally increase the track number. Now this can also be used in conjunction with the auto stop feature, which is useful when recording a record. You record one side of the record, and then when it reaches the end and it gets to a section where it's not played anything for quite a few seconds, it will stop recording, and it gives you the opportunity to take the record out, turn it over and record the other side. Although there is a limitation to this track identification system, on an old record like this, which is full of crackles and pops, there isn't a long enough spell of complete silence between tracks for the recorder to identify that as a break, and therefore it just records everything as one long track. There is a solution though. but it involves having the infrared remote control, something that I don't have. The infrared remote control includes a couple of additional features which aren't available on the machine itself. They're not too important, but I thought I should mention them. If you look at number 28, that's the track increment button. That would solve our issue we were having. When you get to that gap between tracks, press that and it will bring the track on by 1. Also on the bottom left there, number 21, auto music search, which will play the first 10 seconds of each track on a CD. It's just those two features. Well, I suppose in addition to the fact that we've got the number keys on here, which might enable you to enter the text information a little bit quicker than using that dial on the front of the machine. Now, if you're the kind of person that likes reading through specification sheets, well, there's one on screen for this machine now, but if you want to read the whole manual, there's a link to that in the video description text box, and that takes you through to the manufacturer's website, and they allow you to download it as a PDF. Now, the model I've been showing you, the PSD300, came to the market in 2002, but Superscope had a range of these devices. In fact, they're still selling them. But looking at this screen here, at the bottom, the 220 is a simple CD player. The 230 adds the ability to change the key as well as display CD text. The 330 is a single drive CD recorder. The 300 is the one I've shown you, and at the top there, the 340 adds the ability to play back MP3s off CDs. There's a page here out of the B&H Photo Catalogue from 2007. I'll link to this in the video description text box because it gives you a bit more information about the machines and which models had which features. You can see the 220 and the 230 machines there, but in this chart here you can see what each machine was capable of. Now, I mentioned that they were still selling a variant of this machine. It's the PSD 450 Mark II. But just look at those prices. It's either $899 or $999, depending upon the amount of internal storage. But of course, these are professional recording devices. These aren't your normal consumer equipment, but they do find their way onto eBay. The prices there vary wildly. For the machine I've got here, you can pay $700, or you could pay a heck of a lot less. In fact, if we look at the completed auctions, you can see some people here have got some very good deals. If we look at this chap at the top, he only paid $55 for this, perhaps plus shipping. And looking at that auction, that one was fully working. It said it had hardly been used, so that was a pretty good deal. Now, whilst I didn't get quite as good a deal as that when I bought mine in May 2017, I did only pay £105 10p including delivery, and it was already here in the UK, which meant I didn't have to pay any import duty, and importantly it runs on 230 volts. If I was to import one from the US, it's 120 volts. Now it says 60 Hz, it's quite likely it's 50/60 Hz, but I'd have to use it through a step-down power transformer. So there you go. We've spent almost 18 minutes talking about a CD player and recorder, something that you might not have thought possible when we first set out, but given the amount of features this thing has and the fact it will only have been for sale in specialist retailers, I think it warranted it. Now, if you want to get hold of your own PSD machine, I'll have a link in the video description that will take you through to an eBay search. One thing I'd say though, just bide your time with that one. Have a bit of patience because the cheap ones only show up every now and then. Perhaps use a save search. Oh, and also I should say Candy Apple Blue. I've got a link to their website in the video description text box. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.